When is it time to step off the board of directors? In my opinion, there'll be two or three key factors starting to emerge which will, definitely influence your decision to make the decision to resign or step off the board of directors or even the advisory board. Number one reason will always be that your input is no longer valued or no longer serving its purpose. So if you find yourself in a situation where you're continually making suggestions and those suggestions are maybe being overlooked or being ignored, when you're making really valid points in the boardroom setting, but it's just taking way too long for those inputs to have an impact in the business and there's no corrections taking place, anytime you start to see that there is a continuation of a behavior where you're making very valid suggestions and it's just not being valued, it's not being recognized, and it's not being implemented in the business, that would be one of the core reasons that you would start to, consider resigning and stepping off the board. And for me personally, I know that when that scenario starts to happen, it's much better to exit early rather than try and continue on. And you'll notice this over a period of time, usually over a period of 3 to 6 months. If you see that continual scenario where your input is not valued, time to make a move. Second key reason would be if there's any form of disconnect with the actual values of the people around the boardroom table or the organisation. So for example, if an organisation is doing some things that are a little bit risky or not in alignment with the risk appetite statement, or they're trying to be a little bit shades of grey. These are the scenarios where your values are really important and you've got to be crystal clear about them. And when you see a divergence and you see any forms of shades of grey behaviour, sort of behaviour that would not be becoming of that organisation, then that's a key warning sign that you do need to consider stepping off the board. And then the final reason would be if your actual activity on the board is actually having an impact on the rest of your career portfolio. And let's be realistic, a lot of board appointments start out well enough and everyone's very well intentioned, but sometimes the workload can really ramp up for a range of different, valid reasons. But the reality is it can often tip your entire career portfolio out of balance. Now, this particularly can happen in the not-for-profit scenarios where you can often find that maybe the workload's not equally shared and suddenly you're sort of having to do a lot of the heavy lifting. And it might be that the time commitment is just off the charts. Now, I was talking to a number of board executives in the last week, and one particular executive wanted to make this move from unpaid board work to commercially paid board work. And we did an analysis of how much unpaid board work she was actually doing and how much work was actually occurring each week. And she was literally spending days and days each week trying to, service all of these unpaid, volunteer boards. And it was absolutely, crucifying her because she was not able to develop her portfolio correctly. She wasn't actually earning an income. She was actually in a level of financial distress. And she was in this scenario where she had almost like a guilt association with the organisations if she was to resign or pull back. And she was just giving. And the reality is a lot of organisations will take. So if you give those hours, you're never going to get those hours back necessarily. So they're the three key reasons why I would really be starting to think about, is it time to, resign, put your notice in, step off in a really professional, cordial way. Number one, the values, not in alignment. You're starting to see shades of grey. Potentially your input is no longer valued and you're seeing things continually not being improved, changes not being made, same topics coming up, board meeting after board meeting. And then for more personal reasons, if it's actually tipping your own board portfolio out of balance, then you seriously have to consider stepping off, regrouping, and sort of putting things into a proper order going forward. So consider this as you go forward and do a regular review of the boards that are in your portfolio, how they're operating, and whether you are truly adding that value to that boardroom setting, because if not, it might be time to exit stage left.